Welcome to Recovery Reach by Recovery.com, where we talk with marketing and business experts in the substance use and mental health treatment industry to help grow your organization's impact. Because the more people you reach, the more people you can help. Preston Powell, founder of WebServ, joins us to break down wasted spend, smart auditing, and why PPC in behavioral health is anything but one size fits all. Let's get into it. I've got Preston Powell in the studio today. We're going to have a really awesome chat about paid media in the behavioral health space. Preston, thanks for joining. I wonder if you could just start us off with, how did you become an agency owner?
Thanks for having me today. I became an agency owner. I was in sober living. I had a little bit of background in running paid media campaigns for these places that did like high interest, short term business loans, like hard money lending. But before that, couldn't kind of keep it together. I had always kind of wanted to start a business and had tried to start a couple little things while I was using, but they didn't work out. So, anyways, I got sober and I was working at a billing company doing VOBs, and I didn't really love the work. And my partner now, who ran the billing company, had some clients that needed some marketing help, and I got a client that was going to give me a chance, and we started WebServ, and I did really good for that client, and they're still our client today, and yeah, now 7.5 years later, here we are.
That's awesome. Who is like in your client base? Like, are you focused in one area, one type of treatment facility?
No, but once we start talking about paid media, I would say that higher end out of network facilities tend to spend more money on paid media, so they tend to be better clients for us, like a target client. That being said, we'll work with any treatment center, and we work with all different kinds of treatment centers all over the country.
Yeah, perfect. All right, well, let's get into paid media. And I thought that we could start out with like our greatest fears. So I was curious, Preston, when it comes to paid media in behavioral health, is there anything that keeps you up at night or keeps your clients up at night?
Yes. We have a lot of clients that spend in the six figures, and I would say it's actually the hardest thing about what I do because at any given time, two-thirds of our clients are doing really well, but that leaves a good amount of them not doing well, and they switch off, and sometimes it feels like there's no rhyme or reason to it because we follow the best practices, and sometimes people have a bad month or a bad month and a half, and so that definitely keeps me up at night, especially when you're spending millions of dollars of other people's money. That's honestly my biggest pain point in running an agency, and probably my biggest barrier to peace.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we're kind of beholden to Google and the updates that they're making to their products. I know later in this conversation, I think we'll talk a little bit about PMAX and Google's use of AI and kind of if we should just take our hands off the wheel and give it all to Google or if we need to be a little bit more manual with it, but we'll save that for a little bit later. So I'm curious, as an agency owner, you have a lot of different clients with a lot of different needs, serving a lot of different areas. Our listeners are in-house marketers. They're working for one company most of the time, one facility. So I think they'd get a kick to hear, like, what is it like out there? What's the landscape of PPC? What do people have to spend to be successful? Who is usually the most successful at these things? What would you say is the landscape like today?
It's so interesting because in different pockets of the country, it's very different. We work with a lot of like mental health facilities too, and the landscape there is completely different than substance use disorder. I would say in California specifically, there's a lot of like out of network facilities, or mostly out of network, that maybe have a couple contracts that are spending high six figures, and I've heard of them spending seven figures. We don't manage any of those. They tend to be larger organizations that keep it in house. But then you go out to middle America and you see people doing really well locally, spending, $5,000 or $6,000 a month. In regards to spend, it's different. Locally, there's different levels of competition kind of have to know each market. It's weird because I live in Texas now, and I love it here in Texas. But the treatment centers are completely different. They're campus style. You know, they might be one address that has 25 beds on it, and in California, you've got 6-bed residential facilities. It'll be a house in a neighborhood, and it gets a license. They can have 6 people there. You know, in Texas, almost everybody's in network, maybe collecting a third of what, one of these out of network facilities are patient for patient, but the economics are totally different. So, like, if a California center can afford to get a patient for $12,000 from paid media and make some money on that, a Texas center probably couldn't. So they have to run a little bit different strategies. And so it's very, very interesting. Everywhere you go in the country, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah. If you kind of interesting note, what would you say? Imagine this situation. Someone who has been working as a digital marketer as an out of network residential facility in California, they move like so many Californians do to Texas, maybe even Austin, and they start working for one of those in network 20 beds. What do you think are like the biggest shocking moments that they're going to see as they try to pivot into a different market?
Well, I mean, people, not that nobody does, but it's very rare for somebody to spend tens of thousands of dollars every month for a single location treatment center here in Texas. You just don't see it. So their recommendations that may have applied maybe don't apply so much. I think that, they just need to understand the landscape a little bit better. And I feel like we kind of have like a cool strategic advantage because we have clients that do billing all across the country at Revenue Logic and clients that do marketing all across the country at WebServ. And then we've kind of put all that data into a software that we have called Black Book. And so I don't know, through years and years of working with different people and kind of understanding the landscape in different places, it helps a lot because just you have to make different recommendations for people in different areas, but they might struggle a little bit. But I feel like most savvy people kind of figure those things out pretty quickly or know them before they're switching
Yeah,
opportunities.
yeah. Well, that's interesting. So let's kind of pivot and talk about spend and kind of specifically wasted spend. I know in my personal experience, the first time we ever brought on an agency, that was a huge part of their first, couple months of deliverables were like doing an audit, checking out where we're spending money and where we could be saving money. I'm just curious if you, Preston, were going to coach an in-house digital marketer about how to run an audit of their own Google ads, what would you tell them? And I guess first, why would that be important to do? And then two, what are the steps to doing it well?
Absolutely. Wasted spend's a huge topic of discussion in every sales call that we have, just because even in some of the best, most mature campaigns, you can normally find a good deal of wasted spend. Typically, I try and get access to people's Google Ads account, and then you open the search terms report. I tend to filter by things that had at least like 5 clicks or something, or maybe that they spent a minimum of $100 on, and then I will go through that list and then I'll show them. I'll say, hey, look, you spent $9,000 in the last 3 months on competitor terms, on free rehab, maybe things that you don't offer. And, they always kind of react to that quite a bit. To be fair to whoever's running a campaign before us, it is a little bit tough because some of these match types have gotten so broad. So there's 3 keyword match types, right? There's exact match, phrase match, and broad match in Google Ads. And exact match is not exact match anymore. Exact match will match to anything that Google determines means the same thing as the term, and broad match is so broad. And so you have to do a lot of kind of going through that search terms report day in and day out, and stuff does fall through the cracks. But in some instances, it's monitored and controlled really poorly, and sometimes it's pretty good, but it's almost never that we don't find any wasted spend. And in our first month of service, we do what we call like a 1 month strategy sprint, where every week we're doing certain things. It's kind of a templated approach to the strategy phase. And in our second week working together, we do all these things for quick wins, and that's a lot of it's just finding wasted spend and quickly eliminating it, so that even if it takes us a month to build out brand new landing pages, campaigns, and everything, you're getting value along the way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any kind of repeat offenders, things that you find in that early search, the keyword report, where you're like, yep, that's like we see this in almost all of our clients?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so almost always I see competitor terms in there, even if they're not targeting them. Most clients are not targeting them, don't want to show up for them. I hear all the time, oh, these guys are going after our brand term. And it's like, maybe not directly. There's definitely instances where that happens, and you can tell it's like some shady page that it's unclear who is, and it's like, oh, try us instead, is what the ad copy says. But mostly if you're using like some phrase match or broad match, like if you use phrase match with like a term like recovery, there's 1,000 different treatment centers with recovery in their name, and you'll be able to match to all of them with that. And so quickly finding tons of money that went to competitor search terms. I almost always see it. Some people want that in there. We don't do it, not only because it's, questionable, but also because it's not super effective. Because the people a lot of times will call because, their daughter's in treatment at this place, or, they're calling because they need some sort of medical record from the place. It might not be admissions related. It's still expensive, and I don't know, it feels a little dirty.
Yeah, that makes sense. So competitor keywords, you all recommend not really running those campaigns and snuffing those out if they're appearing in your keyword reports. Any other ones that you kind of keep an eye out for in that early audit?
Yeah, so the unfortunate truth is that most of the clients that we work with only take private insurance, and there's just huge search volume around like free rehab, rehab with Medicaid, things like that. We do see tons of that. Those are probably the biggest ones. And then there's just like things that maybe are a little bit too broad, that don't have the intent that we're looking for. Once in a while, we'll see some like physical therapy type stuff, rehab for my shoulder kind of thing. So that's where a lot of wasted spend can be found. And then we go pretty deep into locations, devices, times of day, things like that might not be necessarily wasted spend, but we can find places where the spend's more efficient than others. And when we stop spending in the places that are less efficient, it puts more money into the more efficient places, and typically see a good result from that.
Yeah. Are times of day pretty universal
Hmm.
across your clientele? Times of day that are better than others, or times of day that are certainly worse than others?
Well, yeah, I mean, most of the search volume happens, probably between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. You see a big lull after that. Obviously, if someone's running ads in the West Coast to the whole country, they might need to, if they want to capture that East Coast traffic, it starts at 5 in the morning for them, but
Hmm.
nobody really goes to work at 5 a.m. Typically, we tell our clients that it's best to run ads when you're going to have somebody that's ready to go
Mm.
behind the phone. And regular business hours seem to perform better. The search volume drops on the weekends, and there's still some good competition. That doesn't mean that people don't get results in the middle of the night or on the weekends, but generally, we've seen better results during business hours, but that could be tied to the fact that people have, you know, they're staffed better during those times as well.
Yeah. So someone's doing this audit, whether with an agency or just on their own. What are some like realistic clawback numbers that someone could save? Like how much waste do you think is happening in someone's account pretty regularly? Is it like get a 3%, cash back? Is it greater than that?
Yeah, well, I have a client that was spending about $300,000 a month, and they were running it in-house. It wasn't going very well, and they hired us maybe back in November. We found several $1,000s a day, probably $120,000 a month that we could eliminate right away and reallocate to things that might work. So it's varying degrees, but I would say that search terms report is your best place to find it.
Yeah. I mean, that's almost half of their budget every single month.
Yeah, maybe like a third. Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. Do you remember what the thing was that was sucking all that money? Is
There,
it really niche for them, or was it something that universally applies to everybody?
there was some competitor terms, some big brands that you guys definitely know, but I don't want to mention any specific brands, that we were seeing clicks for $100 and hundreds of them over the course of like 90 days. And so that was pretty big. And then all kinds of mismatched stuff. We added a ton of negative keywords, but then we kind of rebuilt from scratch pretty quick.
Yeah. It's wild. All right. Do you want to jump over into kind of what's going on with Google and PMax and Google and AI? Just like let us know what are the most recent changes, and
Yeah.
we can start there.
So Well, Google's been talking about it for a few years. They've been changing the match types. They've been collecting more data on you and I and everyone and feeding it to their machine learning algorithms so that they can, provide a better result. Ideally, that's the idea. It didn't really work out that way for the first long time, but anyways, there's new ways to bid. When I started WebServ, there was a number of ways that you could bid, but anybody that was having good results back then was using manual cost per click. You almost can't get good results with that anymore. So the first kind of iteration of this implementation of AI was new bidding algorithms. So they're maximize conversions, maximize conversion value, and the wide adoption of that. Those have been around a long time, but it's more recently in the last like maybe 3 years that everybody moved from manual bidding to those automated bidding strategies. Now more recently with keywords, like it's not all about keywords anymore. Google collects, you know, thousands of data points on everybody, and so when you use maximize conversions bidding, Google knows about like what that user does on the internet and can predict how likely they are to convert. So rather than bidding, $20 for every click, they're going to say, hey, this guy's got, a 50% likelihood of converting. Let's bid $50 for this guy's click. Let's show up at the top and let's get a conversion. There's some issues with these things. Not everybody loves them, but just because of a lack of control, but they do seem to be the things that are working the best these days. And then you've got broad match keywords that Google is telling us that they learn from like your exact and phrase match keywords and how things have done and start to match to some longer tail stuff that people normally wouldn't buy. My thought on the thing is that Google needed to sell queries, like needed to sell ad space on queries that people otherwise wouldn't buy because it would take a ton of research and it would also, there's just certain queries that nobody would ever pay money for because they would never do well. So they needed more revenue. But these things are starting to work really well. We've started to add some broad match keywords into some of our tighter ad groups after they have some history, and they're working pretty well. And then Performance Max is a different campaign format that uses something that's called asset groups, where you throw a bunch of headlines, a bunch of descriptions, some videos, some pictures, and they'll use it on all different types of Google properties. That'll be like YouTube, search, display, search partners, and we've actually seen really great results with that. We've seen the cost to get, we call it like the cost per VOB, but maybe cost per opportunity has been lower with those types of campaigns. They're not as tightly targeted, but people are getting good leads and good results from those types of campaigns. But I still think the very most important thing for all this AI is first party data. So you need to have some sort of a CRM or call tracking metrics where you're tracking what happens after the call, because like my clients, for the most part, they don't want leads, right? They want people that are going to fit their criteria and admit to their program. So I need some way of communicating that back to Google Ads through offline conversions, and that's the best data that we can give it. And over time, it learns really well. Not only who's likely to call you with some of this automated bidding, but who's likely to be a good fit for you, maybe financially, maybe the you start to see better cases that are easier to work, people that want to go to treatment today and are ready to go, you know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
So you need to have this first party data to really teach Google and PMax kind of who you are looking for. If you've got that, what are the steps in order to connect it? But then I guess more importantly, like how long does it take Google to learn who is a good fit for your program?
Yeah, so if you look at it like, I guess, like a sales cycle, typically you'd have different stages, right? Like lead, opportunity, and then like a sale. With behavioral health care, you might have a lead that might be a call or a form fill. Your call tracking system's gonna basically do that automatically as long as it's connected. For offline conversions, the things that happen after that, we've got maybe VOB, we've got maybe like a viable opportunity, refer out, or an admission as maybe like what would be in a sales cycle, like closed won stages. But it works the same way. You can connect all of these different things. You just have to mark them in some way, and either like call tracking metrics is really popular in the industry and they have a direct integration with Google Ads. You can build a trigger that says, okay, when I mark this outcome, then send Google Ads as offline conversion, and then you can attach a value to it. Let's say maybe like VOB's 1,000 and a viable opportunities 2,000 and admissions 3,000. Doesn't really matter what those are, just that they're kind of growing. Those are
Hmm.
static values, the best that it could possibly be. And I don't know if our industry's technology is quite there yet, but I know a number of people that are working on that, ourselves included, to send actual dynamic values based upon what they could expect from an admission.
Hmm.
Sorry, that was a
Um,
little technical.
no, we love getting technical on the show. We love getting technical. So you've got this all set up. Are there ways to like structure a campaign to kind of make the learning process more efficient, or do you just kind of have to bite the bullet and put a bunch of money into a campaign and wait until it optimizes itself gradually?
We've actually seen pretty good results fairly quickly in some accounts, and Performance Max, you don't even have to put a lot of money into at all. We've seen good results with $100 a day, which is kind of a lot of money, but $3,000 a month, it's not much. But yeah, there's normally a learning phase. You'll probably get some results right off the bat, but for them to kind of steady and be something that's dependable, we say that we're looking for, ideally like 15 conversions for what we're focusing on. That could be the VOB, the viable opportunity, or even the admission. But you have to spend a lot of money to get 15 admissions a month. So typically, we'll start focusing on the VOB, and we do notice that once we've gotten 15 of those, we start to see a lot more. But even if you get 10 in a 30-day period, or even a little bit less than that, it's okay. But yeah, the more you spend, the more data Google's getting, and it's more data for the AI models to consume, which is going to lead typically to more steady results.
Yeah, that makes sense. How close are we to just taking our hands off the wheel completely and letting Google do everything?
Well, it's interesting. I think AI just needs some oversight, and I don't think we're that close, but it is changing. Like what we spent our time on as advertisers 7 years ago is completely different than what we spend it on today. We were spending tons of time like farming new keywords and going through keyword by keyword, pausing this keyword. We used a campaign setup called single keyword ad groups where we made different ads for every single keyword and built this giant campaign that was pretty hard to maintain but worked really well, and there was a manual bid associated with every single keyword, and there was just, you know, hundreds of different things, sometimes thousands, that you were adjusting regularly. Now that's not really the case anymore. And we look at things, in this state, this happens. With the nuances in our industry, with, insurance policies and all of that, I don't think we're really heading to a place where it would be totally hands off. And creative's really important, right? Like the landing pages, building a brand, super important. There's a number of different things that just I don't think AI can do by itself.
Yeah.
So,
That is interesting how the things you are spending your time on today are much different than 7 years ago. It's kind of like AI is helping to abstract away some of these finer details. It's like going from like programming language of, binary zeros and ones to we're basically plain text talking into an AI interface and it can program things for us now.
absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty wild, and the rate at which things are changing is pretty intense. A lot of queries, like informational queries that used to lead to a click for like SEO, now are being answered directly on the search engine's results page. And so across the board, especially in our industry, any of the informational queries are just going away. There's just less clicks to go around. Luckily, the queries like, you know, best rehabs or rehab in this area are, pulling up recovery.com or pulling up a local map pack, and so there's still the high intent keywords that drive most of the business are still showing up, but it's wild. Everyone talks about like the search engine and then the AI engine separately, but really what's happening is they're merging them together, and it's a trip. It's crazy.
Yeah. Do you have a take on whether AI, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude will start to serve in feed advertising, much like Google has done with the search results?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe there was some talk about like the ChatGPT search. It's associated with Microsoft maybe going to do that in the future. I don't really know. I would say that I've spent a lot more time working on how AI is affecting our SEO because it's more of an issue that's directly in front of us. But yeah, I read that there would be some in ChatGPT's search engine, but I think if that was the case, it would be managed through like Bing ads.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, jumping away from AI and instead actually jumping north to our neighbors to the north in Canada. Canada recently, facilities there are now under the regulations of legit scripts.
Hmm.
And I know that's a topic that you wanted to dive into a little bit. What can our Canadian friends expect now that they are under the iron claw of legit scripts like we are?
Well, new opportunities, right? They haven't been able to advertise for about 7 years on Google Ads, which is a bummer. And so it's good that LegitScript came there and they have an opportunity. Whether or not you agree with LegitScript, at least they have that opportunity. We did a whole campaign. I put together a list of Canadian treatment centers and started reaching out to them saying, hey, we have all this experience in LegitScript. There's some weird stuff right now in like the political climate, and I got some funny responses that were like, are you an American company? Blah, blah, blah. But funny you should mention this. I've been doing a significant portion of our hiring in Canada, and just love some of the talent coming out of Canada and don't really care about the political stuff too much, but we've yet to work with anyone in Canada on the LegitScript process, and really hope to start running some ads in Canada because I remember when LegitScript first came out here, some of the first people to get it were getting just crazy results because there just wasn't any competition yet. And so there's probably a huge opportunity for Canadian treatment programs, at least for the next several months, to do really well with that.
Yeah, I agree. All right, coming up to the end here, I want to do kind of a lightning round of questions. What is one myth you see about PPC and behavioral health that you would love to squash?
I hear all the time that people are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and we won't be able to compete with them because we only have, X amount to spend, and that's not really the case. You're still paying for clicks. You just get less of them. It's not like you automatically lose out to the guy that's spending more. So I hear that a lot, and I think it's a myth.
Yeah. All right. What is one tool for PPC that you cannot live without?
Call tracking of some sort. Yeah.
And what is the key metric that you would use to gauge the health of a PPC campaign?
Probably cost per viable opportunity, but that just depends on what's most important to the client because it varies. But I would say, a leading KPI would be cost per viable VOB. We track everything though. We track like lead to VOB rate, VOB to viable, viable to admit, and it tells us kind of, which levers to pull because, you could be getting tons of really high quality leads for somebody, but maybe they're not closing them. And so if that's the case, we try to provide like a little bit of training if our clients are open to it. Hey, we've worked with 100 people. Like we've noticed like approaches like this tend to work the best. You can take it or leave it. But typically if we have a good like cost per viable opportunity, they're getting some good at bats. That's like the telling thing because anything else could be fixed. But if we can't get the quality leads for a cost that, could have a profitable result for them, then it's going to fail.
Yeah. And then last one is, if somebody working in-house on a facilities marketing team had like half a day to go hog wild within Google Ads, what is one thing that they should spend their time doing?
It's kind of a tough question to answer just because it could be a million different
Yeah.
things and it does kind of take a little bit of a trained eye. But I would start in the search terms report just because that could tell you where you're spending your money and give you a little bit of insight there. From there, it depends. I mean, they could spend their time depending on like where they're starting from. They could be building campaigns, testing performance max, running an experiment that tries broad match. There's a lot that they could do with their time.
Yeah. Half a day, a lot of stuff. All right, let's end it there. Where can folks find more about WebServ and about you?
Yeah, our website's webserv.io. If you go to conferences, you can probably find my colleague Paul. I go to some of them, but we're pretty well represented at different industry conferences. And then, yeah, we're open. I would allow anybody to kind of pick my brain, or if they're interested in working with us, webserv.io. That's where they go.
That's perfect. And also Black Book and Revenue Logic, do you want to just kind of explain like how these things all kind of complement each other?
Yeah, so, and I feel this is kind of important because it sheds some light in kind of my whole philosophy behind this. But, I started working in a billing company and I didn't like the work, but it was really important to get a kind of an understanding of what was going on there. And if you look at other industries, right, like if I'm selling a product for $400, I can run ads every time I get a sale, I can send that conversion value exactly the $400 back to Google Ads, and I can really see what my ROI is in real time. That hasn't really been possible in our industry because it's insurance funded. People are getting paid months behind when they're providing services, and a lot of times by the time they're collecting money, the campaigns that were ran to acquire those patients are forgotten. And so what Black Book is it aggregates out-of-network data, reimbursement data. It's all de-identified so that people can get a real understanding of what they're going to get paid before they accept a patient. future development on that, we're going to build a call tracking metrics integration, and we'll be able to send conversion values that are a better reflection of a real rate in real time, which should greatly increase the performance. And then Revenue Logic's a billing company where we get most of that data, but we have another few sources that we get reimbursement data. So in the long run, I'd like to bring them all under one roof and be more than just like a marketing company, be more of like a tech-enabled platform that really helps people make better business decisions.
That's awesome. All right, Preston. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really good talk about PPC and paid media.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks.
All right, take care.